For that introduction. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Correcting Common Data Errors in Portfolio Manager. This will provide an overview of how to fix common issues when benchmarking your property or your portfolio in the Portfolio Manager tool. So thanks for joining us today. We did just want to call out quickly our upcoming webinars. So tomorrow we will be having the Portfolio Manager 101 session for those who want a refresher on the basics of Portfolio Manager. Next week, we'll be having 2 webinars verifying the Energy Star certification application for those applying, and our Ask the Expert session where you can speak one-on-one with an expert on Portfolio Manager about your property and the questions that you have. On the 18th, we're also going to have a webinar called Cut Utility Costs and Certify Your Vehicle Dealership with Energy Star. If that applies to you, we encourage you to join. The registration links for all of these webinars are at the link on the slide, and these slides, again, will be sent out after the webinar if you don't already have them. Without further ado, we'll get on to our learning objectives for today. So, in today's session, first we'll touch on this introduction, then we are going to learn how to review different types of data quality alerts in Portfolio Manager. We'll address gross floor area and meter data alerts. We will use the data quality checker, and we will troubleshoot other common errors within the application for Energy Star certification. And at the end, we will do a Q&A portion of the webinar. We also just want to note that we have short 5-minute videos on these topics at our trainings web page. I'm going to send the link to this website in the chat, and this would be a good opportunity to make sure you know how to access the chat again. If you didn't hear Chris say it, it's in the bottom right-hand side of your screen. There's a little chat bubble icon. I just sent the link to the trainings website where you can both register for some of those webinars that we just discussed, but also access further training materials on these topics. You'll see a chat box. If you have any questions as we go through today, please feel free to type in your question and send it over to the host, and we'll address it at the end of today's presentation. Alrighty. So we'll start with today's first learning objective, which is reviewing different types of data quality alerts in Portfolio Manager. And if you've used the tool or already benchmarked your property, you might have already noticed that Portfolio Manager does provide guidance as you're benchmarking in the form of these alerts, in the form of tips, and some easily accessible definitions. And these are all intended to prevent common data entry mistakes that we see with our users. So the tips that you'll see, those are purely informational, just to help you with specific pages or features as you go through the tool. Now, alerts, which we've pictured on the screen here, they can either be red stop signs with an exclamation point. They might also be red exclamation points themselves. There's also the yellow yield sign with an exclamation point inside of it. These alert you for potential issues. So these do not necessarily prevent Portfolio Manager from calculating metrics. The yellow ones don't, at least. However, the red stop signs are critical error warnings, and these will stop you from actually calculating metrics. Right? A little bit more on these alerts. So Portfolio Manager may also provide alerts in these 3 ways. First, through the notifications section. Now, this is on the upper right-hand side of your screen when you're in any part of the Portfolio Manager tool. And there might be a red circle with an exclamation point inside of it next to the notifications button, and that will alert you to any issues, potential issues that the tool has identified. You might also see a red exclamation point on the property level tabs. Once you go into a property that you have set up, there might be one or more red exclamation points next to any one of the tabs, whether that's the details tab, the energy tab, etc. There might also be pop-ups that appear as you enter in information about your property. So the one we see on the screen here in the yellow is a meter level alert. Specifically, it's for an electric grid meter with an overlap of data. There might also be these yellow alerts if you are missing data as well. And these are really just intended to warn you and direct your attention to any information that might need correcting. All right, and this final alert in the middle of the slide here with the red text is a use detail alert for a parking property use that is missing values. Okay, with that brief overview of alerts, we can move on to our second learning objective, which is addressing gross floor area and meter data alerts. So just to briefly set our definitions, the gross floor area is the total property square footage as measured between the exterior walls of the building. It is also acceptable to measure this from the inside perimeter of exterior walls if that is more readily available. And this includes all areas inside the building, including supporting areas. Well, note that GFA, gross floor area, is not the same as rentable space, but rather it includes all of the area inside the building or multiple buildings if you are benchmarking a campus. Rentable or leasable space is a subset of gross floor area. And although you do not include any outside areas in your gross floor area, you should include the energy use associated with those areas. So the algorithms within the Portfolio Manager tool do assume that buildings have that outdoor usage as well. And so the GFA is specifically referring to the interior space. But the energy use evaluated in the algorithms should be all of the energy required to operate your building, which includes energy used both inside and out. All right, so some of the alerts that we might see with gross floor area is this first one where the property GFA that's self-reported does not match the property GFA of the buildings that is calculated within Portfolio Manager. So when in this example property, the gross floor area was originally entered as 100,000 square feet. However, as vacant space became added, or as the vacant space was added to the property, it was 10,000 square feet that the user added as vacant space. Therefore, the total property GFA was 110,000 square feet, which we see is the sum of the 100,000 square feet from the building use and the 10,000 square feet from the vacant office use. So what you would want to do in this situation is edit the primary building gross floor area to 90,000 square feet rather than 100,000 square feet to keep the total floor area consistent with that 100,000 square feet. And the reason you know to do this, you can see it in 3 different places on this slide. There is the red exclamation point next to the details tab, the red exclamation point next to property GFA self-reported in the basic information section, and the red exclamation point in the property GFA buildings section. Now, this is an example of a non-urgent alert. You can continue to work with your property without immediately addressing this discrepancy. However, if you are hoping to apply for Energy Star certification, which is a voluntary recognition program that the EPA offers to building owners, if you're hoping to apply for that, and you have any unresolved alerts, you will not be able to apply until you resolve those alerts. All right. So this is one of the more common alerts that we see. Another common alert that we see is with meter data. All right. And similarly, a portfolio manager will identify these kinds of issues with your meter data. And what it's looking for specifically is any gaps or overlaps in your meter entries. Now, these alerts will be shown both at the top of the page as well as below the row that needs to be edited. If you want to address these alerts, you'd simply click on the table to make the changes, or at the bottom of the page by adding entries to enter new lines of information if you are missing data. If you've filled out your information and you have not addressed these alerts, you can still move on from this page. However, again, you will not be able to apply for Energy Star certification if this alert is left unresolved. If there are gaps and overlaps that exist within a meter, you will also see a red exclamation mark on the meters tab header, as well as this next to the specific meter name on that meters tab. And that's intended to call out to users which meters have errors. And this saves you the trouble of going into each meter and searching for those data issues. Rather, Portfolio Manager will show you and guide you to exactly where the data error is so that you can make those corrections either by editing the dates, the usage, or adding new entries. Okay, and that brings us to our third learning objective, which is using the data quality checker. You can use Portfolio Manager's data quality checker at any time to run a quick analysis on the data that you have entered for a given building. On the Summary tab, you would want to locate the data quality checker box, which is about halfway down the Summary tab, and click Check for Possible Errors. When you do this, the data quality checker will check for data for one full year at a time. So that's a full 12 months of data. So for example, if you would run it today and your your year ending date was October 31st of 2024, which is the most recent year ending date, then it would look back 12 months to November 1st of 2023, right? So once you run that checker, you see at the top you can select your time frame. Um, this will be the most recent year ending date that your property has data for. So again, it will check for that full 12 months of meter consumption and property use details. We also call this a metric year. And it will identify problems with meter data, property use details, and property information. So the checker will essentially scan your property and return the results that it found in the form of alerts. You can expand each alert using the drop-down arrow to see a summary of the issue and a description of how to fix it. A green thumbs up means you are all set and that there are no issues to address. If you see this yellow yield sign with an exclamation point inside of it, that indicates atypical data. So this might mean high or low meter entries. It might mean abnormal use details compared to the national average. And if you receive an alert like this, but you know that the information is correct, you can ignore the alert, but it might be a good prompt to just double check with your records and make sure that what you've entered in the tool is in fact correct. You might also get the alerts that we see on the screen here if your property does not have data for water or waste. And if you would not like to benchmark water or waste at the moment, then you can also ignore those alerts. The final type of alert is the one that we see at the top here on the screen, which is the red stop sign with an exclamation point inside of it. That indicates that we have data that is incomplete or missing. So that will prevent metrics from calculating, and we recommend you resolve those issues as soon as you can, whether that means entering in meter data that is missing between gaps, or if it means that you're missing use details or things like that. Right. That brings us to our fourth learning objective for today, which is correcting errors within the application for Energy Star certification. So if you have applied for Energy Star certification, you might receive an email that notifies you that there are issues that need to be corrected within your property. The Energy Star certification review team will outline the actual information that needs to be updated and will provide steps to follow for correction and resubmission. Typically, we will send out an email first asking to clarify certain information, be it meter information or use details or basic property information such as address. And upon your response and either confirming that it is correct or indicating that it needs to be revised, we will send um, the steps to correct and resubmit. So we'll reach out with an email like this one on the slide here. Essentially, we will let you know what needs to be corrected. So in this sample email, we say that the gross floor area listed on the application does not match the gross floor area listed in the property description. This is similar to that gross floor area alert that we saw at the beginning of today's presentation. And after that, we explain the steps to correct the information and then resubmit your application. And typically we will ask for the correction and resubmission to occur within 30 days. Once you get that email, the next step is to correct those issues within the property record. We recommend that you follow those similar alerts that we've been discussing to either update meter data, correct your gross floor area, or other basic information values, add more information to the property description, or correct use details. And once that is finished, then we recommend running the data quality checker one more time just to make sure that all of the issues have been addressed for that certification period. When you rerun that data quality checker, make sure that the year ending date that you're entering in matches what you've entered on the actual certification application, so that the checker can identify what issues the review team might end up catching and then emailing back again. Now, there is another way to identify these errors in addition to the data quality checker prior to submitting your application for the Energy Star certification. And it will actually prevent you from submitting your application. But from the summary tab of your property, you might, next to the score box, you might see that the application status is listed as not currently eligible for Energy Star certification. And from here, if you click on the blue text, we can see it expanded out here. It will tell you exactly what needs to be corrected in your property in order to be eligible for certification. So this example on the slide here, we see that the property is not eligible for Energy Star certification because the weekly operating hours that the person has listed here on their property is outside of the allowed range. So weekly operating hours does have a minimum for this property type, which is why it's flagging as not being eligible. So this alert identifies the problem, saying it's out of range, and then it also shows the actual data that you've entered in. And it will give you step-by-step instructions to correct that data with either your use details or your energy information so that you can be eligible to apply for Energy Star certification. In some cases, this alert might be simply that your score is not high enough, with the minimum score for certification being 75. If that is the case, then we encourage you to use energy savings strategies outlined on the Energy Star website to improve that score. Another error that we see on the Energy Star certification application is submitting without a signature. If that is the case, then we will prompt you to resubmit without having to regenerate a completely new application. And in this case, your application status will instead say, finish your application for Energy Star certification. Again, you will not need to regenerate your application. You can resubmit with the same tracking number that you did as before. And you'll simply click into the navigation bar and the correct place in the application process so that you can re-upload a signed and stamped version of your application. And this can apply for if you're either missing the signatory signature and date, or the licensed professional's signature, or even and especially the licensed professional's stamp. Once you have corrected those issues, you'll go back to the summary tab of your property, and you'll see that it says finish your application for Energy Star certification, and you can click into your application process from here. And if you have made edits to your property, whether that is through correcting your energy data, your use details, or your basic property information, then you would click into the Revise and Regenerate section of your application process. You'd check the box that says, have you completed any necessary revisions? And you'd make sure that the new application that you've generated with the corrected information has been re-signed and stamped by the signatory and the licensed professional. Once you've gotten that new application signed and stamped, then you should re-upload and resubmit that corrected version so that the review team can review the correct information for your property. And to recap today, we learned how to review different types of data quality alerts in Portfolio Manager. We addressed gross floor area and meter data alerts. We used the data quality checker, and we corrected errors within an application for the Energy Star certification. If you have additional questions, we recommend going to our building's help desk link. I will send this in the chat, but it's also in the slide deck. And here we have a very extensive list of FAQs. And we also have an online form where you can submit any questions that you have about your property to our building's help desk. I'm just going to copy this link and send it in the chat. We also have additional portfolio manager trainings resources available at the trainings link. That was the first link that I sent at the beginning of today's presentation. There we have step-by-step documents. We have access to other recorded trainings that we've given and short demo videos. And we also have information and registration links for upcoming trainings. And then I'll also plug the Ask the Expert sessions that we have every other Wednesday at noon. Again, it's an open Q&A session for any questions that you have related to your property and portfolio manager. And then we also have a technical reference series linked on the slide here. Additional help links that might help you as you're applying for Energy Star certification. We have an LP finder to help you find licensed professionals that have verified properties in your area, so you can search based on geographic location. And you can also search based on cost-free verification, where you can find LPs that will do verifications pro bono for if you meet certain criteria. And then finally, if you are looking to have further energy management help, we recommend going to the SPP partner list or service and product provider partner list via the link on the slide. All right, and before we get to our Q&A, we are going to actually review, since we have some time here, the appendix slides to touch on a few of the extra common errors and how to resolve them. So this is also in the slides that, again, you will receive after we're done here today if you have not already received them. But we have 11 common errors listed here on the following slides as well. This first one is that the building has incomplete data in the baseline period, either the change in the baseline period or the populated data in that period. And to fix this, you would go to the Energy tab within Portfolio Manager, click on the meter name, and then complete your meter entries to cover that given 12-month period. The second error message is that no meters are defined. And in order to track energy use and receive your metrics, you should create an energy meter in the Energy tab. You would click the meter ID and enter the appropriate energy use data for those 12 months. You also might receive the error that the building has insufficient meter data to calculate the usage during the given baseline period. If that's the case, then you would go to the Energy tab again, click on the meter ID, and then enter in the correct energy use for those 12 months. A few more on meters. Sometimes we'll see that the building meter has meter readings prior to the original occupancy date. And if you receive this error message, or warning message, then you should go to the building's details tab, and in the basic information box, you would click edit and edit the year built. That's if the year built was incorrect. You might also need to correct the meter readings and the dates there. If that's the case, you would go to the Energy tab, click on the correct meter ID, and correct the dates. You might also receive the warning message that the building meter has gaps or overlaps in meter readings. This is the one that we saw earlier in the slides with the yellow banners. If this is the case, you would click on the meter name and um, fill in the gaps or correct the dates so that there are no overlaps. This next one is about the building meter disconnection date not being the same as the meter's last reading end date. And there are meter entries after the date meter became inactive. Any bills after the date meter became inactive will not be used in your metrics. This last one on the slide here is that the building meter has no meter readings and the building meter does not have 12 months of continuous meter readings. If that's the case, you would go to the Energy tab, click on the meter ID, and just enter the energy used for the full baseline period. We have 4 more here. These are the last common errors that we'll touch on today. The first one is that the property has no waste or material meters. We saw this one earlier as well. It's not required that you enter this in, and it's optional for you to enter it in if you have that data. You're welcome to track it there as well. The second warning message is that the source EUI appears low. If that's the case, double check your meters to ensure that you've entered in all of the meter information correctly. Check all of the data points to make sure the units are correct and that the actual values are correct as well. This next warning message is that the number of bedrooms per unit appears unusual for the year selected. If that is the case, then we recommend you double check with your records and then make sure in Portfolio Manager that your use details have all been entered in correctly. And then finally, this last warning message is that the meter date, that there is meter data before the active date. And if that's the case, you would go to the Energy tab, click the meter ID, and set the active date for the meter to the start date of the first usage period. All right, and that's all for today. Thank you all. We will now move into our Q&A session. We've only gotten a few questions in, and we would like to devote quite a bit of time to your questions that you have for us. So again, if you'd like to ask a question, please feel free to pop it in the chat. You can access that by going to the chat bubble on the lower right side of the screen. And then you'll just type in your chat to Chris, who's the host. But we'll get started with our questions and we can end the recording here.